Look at an ordinary backyard. A fence, a patch of grass, maybe a few flower pots. Most people see decoration, maybe a hobby, something nice to look at. But during a crisis, that same space can become the difference between panic and stability. The biggest lie we are told about food is that it will always be there when we need it. Grocery stores make it feel endless. Shelves full, trucks arriving, prices changing, but food always available. Until suddenly it isn't. Storms cut transport, supply chains stall, prices jump, and families realize too late that food security starts long before shelves go empty. It starts in soil. Today, we're counting down 15 crops every family should already be growing before hard times arrive. Some produce in weeks, some store for months. And I saved one controversial crop for number 4, because many traditional gardeners still underestimate how powerful it is. And number 1 may be the closest thing to a plant once and survive crop you can grow. At number 15, we have radish. If a crisis starts tomorrow, this is one of the few crops that can still help you fast. That's because radishes grow at a speed that feels almost unnatural. In many cases, you can harvest in under a month. That matters. In difficult times, the first thing people lose is not food entirely. It's fresh food. The produce section empties first. Leafy vegetables disappear. Prices rise. But radishes grow quickly enough that even a beginner can start producing something meaningful before larger crops mature. Another reason radishes matter is density. They can grow in containers, raised beds, or narrow rows. You don't need much. A small area can produce repeated harvests throughout a season. Most people only think of the red root, but the greens are edible too. That means the same planting can produce salad greens before the roots are even harvested. And that's what makes radishes more powerful than they seem. They are not just food, they are speed. And speed changes how quickly a household becomes self-reliant. The first time someone pulls a radish from the soil in under a month, something shifts. They stop seeing gardening as a hobby. They start seeing it as security. At number 14, we have green onion. This may be the most underestimated emergency crop in the entire garden. Because on the surface, it looks small, almost insignificant. But in hard times, flavor becomes more important than people realize. Basic food gets repetitive fast. Rice, beans, potatoes, soup. And that's where green onions quietly become essential. They transform simple meals without requiring much space. Another reason they matter is regrowth. Cut them once, and many varieties come back. That means one planting can stretch far beyond a single harvest. Some people don't even plant seeds. They regrow store-bought scraps. That's how simple it is. A few containers near a kitchen door can keep producing all season. But the real power is consistency. Green onions become available almost every day. And during uncertainty, daily access to fresh food creates a psychological advantage as much as a nutritional one. It reminds you that food is still coming from somewhere you control. That changes how people feel in unstable times. Green onions may not feed a family by themselves, but they prove that your home can keep producing when outside systems fail. At number 13, we have lettuce. Most people harvest lettuce once and throw the plant away. That is one of the biggest mistakes in home food growing. Because lettuce is not just a one-time crop. If harvested correctly, it becomes a continuous source of food. You remove the outer leaves and leave the center growing. That simple technique turns one plant into weeks of harvest. During a crisis, that matters more than people think. Fresh greens become rare quickly because they spoil fast and depend entirely on transportation. But lettuce at home means fresh food on demand. Another advantage is speed. Baby leaves can be harvested early, long before the full plant matures. That means one bed can start feeding you quickly. And because it grows in pots, raised beds, or small backyard spaces, almost anyone can start. The bigger lesson is this: in difficult times, repeated harvest crops are more valuable than one-time harvest crops, because they reduce labor and increase reliability. A few containers of lettuce may not look like much, but week after week, they quietly become one of the most dependable sources of fresh food on your property. At number 12, we have bush bean. There's a reason beans have followed families through wars, recessions, and food shortages for generations. They are not just garden crops. They are one of the oldest backup food systems in human history. Bush beans matter because they give something many backyard gardens fail to provide: real substance. Fresh greens are useful, but beans add protein and staying power. They make a meal feel complete. Another reason they belong on this list is consistency. Bush beans stay compact, which makes them easy to grow even in tight spaces. And once they start producing, they often keep going as long as you keep harvesting. The plant sees empty space and responds by creating more pods. That repeated cycle is exactly what you want when conditions are uncertain. And there's another layer most people ignore. If you stop picking them fresh and let some mature fully, they become dry beans. Suddenly, that same plant gives you food now and food you can store for later. That is how smart gardens work during hard times. One crop serving two timelines: immediate food and shelf-stable reserves. A row of beans may not look dramatic, but when stores become expensive and protein becomes harder to afford, those pods stop looking ordinary. They start looking like insurance. At number 11, we have Swiss chard. This is the crop many people overlook because it doesn't get the attention of kale or lettuce. But that's exactly why it surprises so many experienced gardeners. Swiss chard keeps producing under conditions that stop other greens: heat that causes lettuce to bolt, cool nights that slow summer plants, irregular watering. It tolerates all of it better than most people expect. And during a crisis, resilient crops matter more than trendy crops. Another reason it's so powerful is harvest style. Like kale, You remove the outer leaves and the center keeps growing. That means one plant turns into repeated harvests for months. But what makes Swiss chard especially valuable is leaf size. One cut can feel substantial. Enough for a pan, enough for a side dish, enough to stretch a meal. The colorful stems are edible too, which means less waste. And unlike delicate greens, Swiss chard can continue producing through changing weather without demanding constant attention. That matters when life gets chaotic. Because during difficult times, the best crops are not always the highest yielding. They're often the ones that keep showing up, even when everything else struggles. Swiss chard does exactly that. Quietly, consistently, without asking for much in return. At number 10, we have kale. Some plants are productive, others are resilient. Kale is both, and that's why it has earned its reputation among serious growers. The reason it matters during hard times is simple. When many gardens slow down, kale often keeps going. Cold rain, frost, sudden weather shifts, conditions that destroy tender vegetables often barely slow kale down. In some climates, it continues producing deep into winter. That alone makes it valuable. But the bigger advantage is repeat harvest. You don't remove the whole plant. You harvest leaves one by one. The center continues growing, and the cycle repeats. That means one planting can become months of food. And because kale becomes sweeter after frost, it often improves when other crops fail. Another reason it belongs on this list is nutritional density. In a crisis, variety often shrinks. People rely on fewer foods. Kale helps balance that by offering significant vitamins and minerals from a small area. One row may not look like much in summer, but in late season, when most plants are fading and kale is still standing, people understand why it matters. It becomes the crop that keeps producing when others are gone. That reliability is exactly what hard times demand. At number 9, we have garlic. This may be one of the most strategic plants any family can grow. Not because it feeds you immediately, but because it stores so well that it quietly extends your food security long after harvest. Garlic is one of those crops that teaches patience. You plant it and wait. It doesn't rush. But when it's ready, one small area can produce months of stored flavor and planting stock for the next season. That second part matters, because garlic multiplies itself. One clove becomes one bulb, and part of that harvest becomes the next year's crop. That means it's not just food. It's a self-renewing food source. Another reason garlic matters is what it does to basic meals. During shortages, people often end up relying on repetitive staples: beans, rice, potatoes, grains. Garlic transforms those foods. It makes simple ingredients feel like meals. And in hard times, morale matters as much as calories. A garden that gives only bulk food may keep you fed, but a garden that gives flavor keeps meals sustainable day after day. Garlic has survived in family gardens for centuries for exactly this reason. It stores, it multiplies, and it makes everything else better. At number 8, we have carrot. Carrots don't usually get included in survival conversations, and that's a mistake. Because in hard times, the most valuable crops are often the ones people already know how to cook. Carrots fit into almost every kitchen. Soups, stews, roasted dishes, stock, fresh snacks. They don't require special recipes or complicated storage. That practicality matters. Another reason carrots belong on this list is shelf life. Stored properly, they can last much longer than most fresh vegetables. That means they bridge the gap between harvest and the next crop. In a crisis, that bridge is everything. Carrots also grow efficiently. A small bed can hold a surprising number of roots, especially if planted densely and thinned correctly. And unlike delicate greens, they store energy underground. While the leaves grow above, the real value is hidden below. That hidden harvest changes the psychology of gardening. You stop seeing leaves, you start seeing reserves. That's important, because food security often means learning to think below the surface. Carrots may seem ordinary, but that's exactly why they matter. When times are uncertain, familiar food becomes powerful. People don't need to learn how to use them, they already know. And that makes carrots one of the smartest crops to plant before anyone thinks they need them. At number 7, we have cabbage. If one plant could represent old world food security, it would be cabbage. For generations, families depended on it not because it was exciting, but because it worked. One head provides a surprisingly large amount of food. It's dense, it fills space in meals, and it stores longer than most leafy crops. But that's only half the story. The real power of cabbage is preservation, because once you ferment it, everything changes. Sauerkraut turns a fresh vegetable into a shelf-stable food that can last for months while keeping nutritional value. That means one harvest can keep feeding you long after the garden slows down. Another reason cabbage matters is climate flexibility. It performs well in cooler weather and can handle conditions many warm crops cannot. That extends your season. It's not glamorous, but it's dependable. And during hard times, dependable beats exciting every time. There's a reason cabbage appears again and again throughout history whenever communities faced shortages. It stores, it fills, it adapts. It has helped people through winters, wars, and economic collapse. And it still can. At number 6, we have corn. This is where a backyard stops being just a garden and starts becoming a calorie system. Because corn changes the scale. Many vegetables add nutrition. Corn adds food energy. It fills stomachs. It stores well. And once dried, it becomes one of the most flexible crops you can produce. It can be boiled, roasted, ground, dried, and stored for long periods. That makes it far more than a summer vegetable. It becomes a staple. Another reason corn matters is history. Entire civilizations were built around it. Communities survived on it. Families depended on it. That's not accidental. It's because corn turns relatively small spaces into meaningful calories. It's not always the easiest crop for beginners, but its value in uncertain times is enormous. The psychological effect matters too. Seeing rows of corn changes how a space feels. It no longer looks decorative. It looks productive, serious, prepared. And that matters because hard times often expose how dependent modern households are on external systems. Corn is one of the clearest reminders that food can still come directly from your own land. At number 5, we have dry bean. This is the point where gardening crosses into true preparedness. Fresh vegetables are valuable, but dry beans are something else entirely. They are shelf-stable food, protein that doesn't depend on refrigeration, a crop that can sit in storage and still feed a family months later. That changes everything. Another reason dry beans are so powerful is efficiency. A small area can produce a surprising amount of stored food if managed correctly. And unlike many vegetables that must be eaten immediately, dry beans buy time. That's critical, because in a real crisis, flexibility matters as much as supply. You may not be able to harvest every day. You may not have easy access to stores. Dry beans remove that pressure. They wait for you. Another reason they matter is compatibility. They pair with almost everything: rice, potatoes, soups, corn, preserved vegetables. They become the backbone of simple meals. This is why I placed them here. Because once a family grows enough dry beans to fill jars or buckets, something changes mentally. They stop thinking in terms of this week's groceries. They start thinking in terms of stored seasons. That shift is where real resilience begins. At number 4, we have potato. This is the controversial one, because many traditional gardeners will argue that potatoes take too much space. And on paper, they may be right. But history tells a different story. Potatoes have carried entire populations through famine, war, and economic collapse because they produce something many crops cannot: serious calories from relatively small ground. That matters more than almost anything during hard times. You can eat greens and still be hungry. Potatoes are different. They fill people. They sustain people. Another reason they belong near the top is storage. Properly cured, they last for months. That means one harvest continues feeding you long after the growing season ends. And the real power is hidden underground. During the season, they don't look dramatic. Leaves above, nothing special. But when harvest day comes and the soil opens, people see what the plant was building the entire time. That reveal changes how they think about gardening. Because suddenly, a small patch produces sacks of food. Not garnish, not salad, meals. Potatoes are not trendy. They are not beautiful. But in a crisis, they become one of the most honest crops you can grow. They remind you that the garden is not there to impress people. It's there to feed them. At number 3, we have sweet potato. If potatoes are about calorie security, sweet potatoes may be about efficiency. Because they offer something rare: 2 edible harvests from one crop. The roots grow underground, but the leaves are edible too. That means one planting produces greens throughout the season and storage roots at the end. Very few crops do that. Another reason sweet potatoes matter is resilience. They thrive in heat that damages many other vegetables. Drought conditions that stress delicate crops often barely slow them down once established. That makes them ideal for uncertain weather. And when the vines spread, Most people underestimate what is happening below. They see leaves, but underground, tubers are expanding, quietly, day after day. Then harvest arrives, and the hidden reserve appears. Sweet potatoes also store well, giving you food beyond the season. And because they provide both immediate greens and later calories, they stretch the usefulness of a single garden space farther than most crops can. In difficult times, that kind of efficiency becomes priceless. It's not just about harvest. It's about how many roles one plant can play in your survival system. At number 2, we have winter squash. If you skip to the end, at least don't skip this, because winter squash is one of the most overlooked preparedness crops in modern gardens. People see pumpkins, butternut squash, acorn squash, and think seasonal decoration. But these plants are ancient food storage systems. Harvested at the right time, many varieties can sit for months without refrigeration. No electricity, no freezer, just shelf storage. That alone makes them extraordinary. Another reason they matter is weight. One vine can produce large fruits that hold significant calories. When a family harvests several winter squash, the food feels real, heavy, durable, reliable. That changes perception. It's no longer just gardening, it's visible preparation. Another reason is versatility. Squash can be roasted, mashed, baked into breads, added to soups, preserved. It stretches meals while storing naturally. And once people realize one crop can sit in a cool room and remain edible deep into winter, it often becomes a permanent part of the garden. That is why it ranks here. It's not just what it produces, it's how long it stays useful. And finally, number 1, Jerusalem artichoke. This may be the closest thing a survival gardener has to planting insurance. Because once established, it often comes back whether you planned for it or not. It survives cold. It tolerates neglect. It spreads aggressively. And underground, it stores food where no shelf, pantry, or outage can take it away. That's what makes it extraordinary. Another reason it matters is timing. In a true crisis, many families realize too late that annual crops depend on planning. Seeds, timing, labor, water. But Jerusalem artichokes remove much of that pressure. Plant once, and the system keeps returning. The tubers stay underground until you need them. In many ways, the garden itself becomes storage. That changes everything. Because food is not sitting in jars. It's still alive in the ground, waiting. And that is a powerful form of resilience. It's why I placed it here. Because when systems fail, the strongest crops are often not the most productive in one season. They are the ones that refuse to disappear. Jerusalem artichokes do exactly that. They return, again and again, long after many gardeners forget they planted them. The lesson behind all 15 crops is not just gardening. It's timing. Most people wait until they feel pressure before they prepare. But by then, seeds are sold out, prices rise, shelves thin, and the best season to plant has already passed. That's why the smartest families don't grow food because they are afraid. They grow food because they understand systems fail. Weather changes. Supply chains break, prices move faster than wages. And when that happens, the most valuable land in the world is not farmland far away. It's the soil already under your feet. One raised bed, one row, one container. That's how it begins. And over time, that small patch stops being a garden. It becomes something much more valuable: independence. When times get difficult, the most valuable crops are the ones that produce reliable food consistently and efficiently. But many people assume growing enough food requires large amounts of land. The truth is, some of the highest producing vegetables thrive in containers, making it possible to grow impressive harvests on patios, balconies, porches, and even small urban. Next, today, we're counting down 15 crops that grow like crazy in pots. Some grow so fast that you'll harvest in less than a month. Others keep feeding you for months from the same plant. And number 6 may produce more food than many backyard gardens, while number 1 gives you 2 edible harvests from the same container. Let's begin. At number 15, we have radish. Radishes are one of the best crops to begin with because they reward you fast. Many people give up on gardening because they plant something and wait too long for results. Radishes solve that problem immediately. In many cases, they can be ready in under 30 days. That means one container can produce several harvest cycles in a single season. Another reason radishes work so well in pots is their compact size. Their roots don't need huge depth, and many plants can grow together in one medium-sized container. That creates high productivity from a tiny space. Radishes also perform in cooler weather, making them excellent for spring and fall when many summer crops are not growing. And most people only think of the root, but the greens are edible too. Young leaves can be added to salads or cooked. That means one planting can produce more than expected. Radishes are important because they teach something quickly. A simple pot on a balcony can produce food much faster than most people imagine. That changes everything for beginners. At number 14, we have green onion. If there's one crop that proves how efficient pots can be, it's green onions. They grow upward, not outward, which means they use vertical space efficiently. One container can hold many plants at once. But what makes them special is how they regrow. Cut the green tops, leave the roots, and many continue producing. That turns one pot into a long-term food source. Another reason they matter is daily usefulness. Green onions go into eggs, soups, noodles, rice dishes, sauces, and salads. They're one of those ingredients you constantly need. And because they grow so easily, they're ideal for people with very little space. Some growers don't even start from seed. They regrow store-bought scraps in containers. That makes them one of the cheapest crops to start. A simple pot by a sunny door can keep producing all season. And because the harvest feels immediate, it reinforces the habit of growing your own food. Small effort, constant return. At number 13, we have lettuce. Most people underestimate how productive lettuce can be in pots because they harvest it wrong. They wait until the whole head forms, cut everything, and then start over. But container growers often use a different strategy. Harvest the outer leaves, leave the center, and the plant continues growing. This cut and come again method transforms one container into weeks of harvest. Another reason lettuce thrives in pots is density. Several plants can grow together in one wide planter, turning a single container into a reliable salad source. Lettuce also grows quickly enough to keep people interested. Within a short time, the pot starts producing food you can use immediately. And because fresh lettuce loses quality quickly after harvest, homegrown leaves often taste dramatically better than store versions. The ability to move pots also matters. In spring, full sun. In summer, partial shade. That flexibility increases success. A simple container of lettuce can quietly become one of the most productive parts of a small garden. At number 12, we have beet. Beets are one of the smartest crops for containers because they give you two edible harvests from the same planting. Most people think of the root, but the greens are also edible. That means while the beetroot develops underground, the leaves are already producing food above. This doubles the value of one container. Another advantage is controlled soil. Beets often grow better in pots because loose potting mix allows roots to develop evenly. In hard garden soil, roots can become misshapen. In containers, the environment is easier to manage. Several beets can grow in one pot, creating surprising productivity from a small area. They also handle cooler temperatures well, making them useful before summer crops take over. And once harvested, beetroots store well. That means the container doesn't just produce fresh food, it produces food that lasts. Beets show that one pot can support both immediate harvest and stored harvest. That's a big advantage for anyone trying to grow seriously in small spaces. At number 11, we have bush bean. Bush beans are one of the most useful crops for container growing because they stay compact while producing repeatedly. Unlike pole beans, they don't require tall trellises, making them easier for balconies and patios. But despite their small size, they can yield heavily. As long as you keep harvesting, they keep making more pods. That repeated cycle turns one pot into a surprisingly dependable food source. Another reason bush beans stand out is nutrition. They add protein and fiber, making them more filling than many greens. That matters if you're trying to grow food with real value. Bush beans also improve soil by fixing nitrogen, which helps future crops if you reuse the container soil. They mature relatively quickly and require little complexity. A row of pots filled with bush beans can produce enough food to change how people think about container gardening. It stops feeling decorative. It starts feeling practical. At number 10, we have kale. Kale is one of the most dependable crops you can grow in pots because it turns a single plant into a long-term food source. Unlike vegetables that are harvested once and removed, kale keeps producing. You harvest the outer leaves and leave the center growing. The plant responds by making more leaves. That means one container can feed you for months instead of one meal. Another reason kale performs so well in pots is its upright growth. It uses vertical space efficiently, making it ideal for balconies or patios where every inch matters. Kale also handles cool weather better than most crops. In fact, many gardeners say frost improves the flavor, making the leaves sweeter. While other plants fade, kale keeps producing. Nutritionally, it's also one of the most valuable greens you can grow. Rich in vitamins, minerals, and fiber, it adds real nutritional weight to a container garden. And because it continues growing through changing seasons, it becomes one of the most stable crops in the system. A single pot of kale may look simple at first, but over time, it becomes one of the most useful food producers you own. At number 9, we have Swiss chard. Swiss chard is often overlooked, but in containers, it can outperform many more popular vegetables. It works similarly to kale. You harvest the outer leaves while the center keeps growing. But what makes Swiss chard especially valuable is heat tolerance. Many greens struggle when summer temperatures rise. Swiss chard often keeps going. That makes it one of the best options for warm patios and sunny balconies. Another advantage is leaf size. The leaves become large and substantial, which means one harvest feels significant. A single pot can supply repeated cuttings for weeks or months. The colorful stems, red, yellow, orange, also make the plant attractive. That matters because many people want productive spaces that still look beautiful. Swiss chard offers both. And because the stems are edible too, very little is wasted. It's one of those crops that quietly produces without drawing much attention, but over time, it often becomes one of the highest yielding containers in the garden. At number 8, we have carrot. Carrots may seem like something that belongs in the ground, but they often grow beautifully in containers. In fact, many gardeners get better results in pots because the soil is easier to control. Carrots need loose, deep, well-drained soil. In backyard gardens, hard patches or rocks can cause roots to twist or split. But in a container, you create the ideal growing medium from the start. Another reason carrots work so well is density. A medium-sized pot can hold many carrot plants. That means dozens of roots from one container. And because they store well, they remain useful long after harvest. Carrots are also incredibly versatile in the kitchen. Soups, roasting, salads, juices, snacks. That makes them practical, not just interesting. For small space growers, carrots prove that even classic root crops can thrive without garden beds. One pot of carrots changes how people think about what's possible in containers. At number 7, we have cucumber. This is where container gardening starts surprising people. Cucumbers naturally want to climb, and when you give them support, one pot can produce an incredible amount of food. Instead of spreading across the ground, the vine grows upward. That means the same footprint produces far more. Another reason cucumbers are so powerful is continuous harvest. Once the plant starts producing, it often keeps making fruit for weeks. The more frequently you harvest, the more it tends to produce. Fresh cucumbers are also one of the most satisfying summer crops. Cool, crisp, immediate. And because the fruit hangs from a trellis, it often stays cleaner and healthier than ground-grown vines. A single container near a fence, railing, or balcony support can become a vertical food wall. It's one of the clearest examples that small spaces can produce far more than expected. At number 6, we have potato. This is often the crop that completely changes someone's perspective on container gardening. Potatoes in pots feel almost hidden. You plant a few seed potatoes, add soil as the stems grow, and then wait. For weeks, there's nothing dramatic to see. But underground, the real harvest is building. Then, harvest day arrives. You empty the container, and suddenly potatoes spill out everywhere. That reveal makes a huge impression. It transforms a pot into something much bigger than a container. It becomes a hidden food reserve. Another reason potatoes are so effective is storage. Unlike delicate greens, potatoes can last for months. That means the container creates food for now and food for later. They're also calorie-dense, which makes them feel substantial. One pot of potatoes may not feed a household all year, but it proves that even a single container can produce serious food. Once people see that first harvest, they often never look at empty pots the same way again. At number 5, we have pepper. Peppers are one of the best container crops because they combine compact growth with long-term production. They don't need much space, yet they can keep producing fruit for months. That makes them ideal for patios, balconies, and small porches where every container matters. Another reason peppers thrive in pots is warmth. Containers heat up faster than the ground, and peppers love warm roots. That often leads to stronger growth and better yields. One healthy plant can produce dozens of fruits over the season, especially when regularly harvested. Bell peppers, jalapenos, banana peppers, cayenne. Many varieties perform extremely well in containers. Another advantage is versatility. You can eat them fresh, roast them, freeze them, dry them, or make sauces. That means every harvest can be used in multiple ways. And visually, peppers make containers look productive. Seeing bright red, yellow, and green fruit hanging from one plant makes the harvest feel abundant. Peppers prove that one simple pot can quietly become one of the most valuable parts of a small garden. At number 4, we have eggplant. Eggplant may not be the first crop people think of for containers, but it often performs remarkably well. It loves heat, and containers naturally warm up in the sun, creating ideal conditions. Compact varieties especially thrive in pots. One healthy plant can produce repeated harvests throughout the warm season. Another reason eggplant works so well is space efficiency. It grows upward and remains manageable, making it suitable even for tight patios. And because eggplants are often expensive in stores, especially specialty varieties, harvesting them at home feels surprisingly valuable. The fruits themselves are large enough that each harvest feels meaningful. 1 or 2 fruits can become a full meal. That changes how productive a single container feels. Eggplant also adds visual appeal. Glossy purple fruit hanging from a container-grown plant looks dramatic and instantly signals abundance. It proves that small-space gardening is capable of producing serious crops, not just herbs and greens. At number 3, we have cherry tomato. Cherry tomatoes may be one of the most productive container crops in the world. Give one plant a pot, a cage, and sunlight, and it can become a tower of fruit. Unlike larger tomatoes that often produce in waves, cherry tomatoes can continue for months. One plant may yield dozens or even hundreds of fruits over a season. That makes them incredibly efficient. Another reason they perform so well is vertical growth. The plant climbs upward, using height instead of spreading across valuable ground. For balconies or patios, that's ideal. Fresh flavor is another advantage. Homegrown cherry tomatoes are usually sweeter and richer than store-bought versions. Once people taste the difference, many stop buying them entirely. And visually, nothing says productivity like a plant loaded with clusters of red fruit. A few pots can suddenly transform a tiny patio into a surprisingly productive food source. Cherry tomatoes show how one container can outperform expectations over and over again. At number 2, we have zucchini. Zucchini has a reputation for overwhelming gardeners, and that reputation is deserved. Even in containers, it can produce heavily. Compact bush varieties are best for pots because they stay manageable while still generating large harvests. Another reason zucchini stands out is fruit size. Unlike small greens, each harvest feels substantial. One zucchini can become a meal, side dish, or preserved food. That makes one pot feel much more productive. The plant also grows quickly. Leaves expand fast, flowers appear, and fruit often seems to appear overnight. That dramatic growth keeps viewers interested and keeps gardeners motivated. One healthy plant can produce continuously for much of the season, especially if harvested while fruits are young. A single pot of zucchini proves something powerful. Container gardening is not limited to tiny harvests. It can produce food that fills an entire kitchen counter. And finally, number 1, sweet potato. This crop changes the entire concept of container growing because it gives you 2 edible harvests from one plant. The roots grow underground, but the leaves can also be harvested as greens. That means one pot provides food during the growing season and again at harvest time. Few crops offer that kind of efficiency. Another reason sweet potatoes dominate containers is heat tolerance. They thrive in hot conditions, and containers create warm soil that encourages vigorous growth. As the vines spread, the plant may not look impressive at first. But beneath the soil, tubers are forming the entire time. Then, harvest day arrives, and emptying the container reveals a hidden food reserve. Sweet potatoes also store well, making them practical beyond the day they're harvested. They provide calories, greens, and long-term storage from a single planting. That makes them one of the smartest container crops possible. One pot becomes greens, roots, stored food, a complete small space system. What these 15 crops reveal is simple. Most people think growing food is about having more land, but land is not the real limitation. The real limitation is understanding how much a small space can produce when every container is used well. A pot may look ordinary. Most people see something decorative, but the right grower sees productive ground. One pot can grow salad. Another can produce roots. Another becomes a vertical vine. Another hides food underground. And once one container becomes 5, and 5 become 10, a small patio or balcony stops feeling limited. It starts feeling capable. That's the shift. Once you stop thinking of containers as small and start thinking of them as systems, even the smallest place you live begins producing far more than most people ever thought possible.